I was running through the dark parking garage at 2 a.m. with my ex-boyfriend's heavy footsteps echoing behind me, and his voice yelling my name in that angry, threatening tone I'd learned to fear, when a black motorcycle appeared out of nowhere and pulled up beside me, going slow enough to match my panicked running pace. The rider, in dark leather and a black helmet, said just 2 words, "Get on." I hesitated for maybe half a second, my mind racing through the danger of getting on a motorcycle with a complete stranger versus the very real danger of my ex catching up to me, before I heard Marcus yell my name from 2 levels up in the garage, his voice full of rage, and I made a split-second choice that would change everything. I jumped on the back of that motorcycle and wrapped my arms around the stranger's waist, and we sped out of the parking garage with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. When we finally stopped 3 blocks away under a flickering streetlight and an empty parking lot, the rider cut the engine and took off his helmet, and I saw the most intense, dark eyes I'd ever seen, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Your ex?" he said, and it wasn't a question, but a statement, like he knew exactly what was happening. "If he comes near you again, I dare him to try. Tell him I said, try me, see what happens." My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 27 years old, work as a nurse in the emergency department at Metropolitan Hospital downtown, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of how I escaped from one dangerous, controlling man straight into the arms of another man who might have been even more dangerous in his own way, how protection gradually became possession, how a dramatic rescue turned into a different kind of trap, and how it took me almost a full year to recognize what was happening and find the strength and resources to escape a second time. The story really starts 6 months earlier, when I finally gathered enough courage to leave my boyfriend of 3 years, Marcus Webb. Marcus was controlling and jealous and increasingly violent, the kind of person who started out incredibly charming and attentive and romantic, and slowly revealed himself over time to be someone who needed to control every single aspect of my life, and who would use violence when other control methods failed. The first year with Marcus was genuinely good, or at least it seemed good at the time, though looking back I can see red flags I missed or ignored. He was sweet and thoughtful and made me feel like the most special person in the world. He'd send flowers to my work, he'd plan elaborate dates, he'd text me constantly saying he was thinking about me. He seemed perfect, attentive without being clingy, romantic without being over the top, interested in my life and my work and my dreams, but somewhere in the second year, things started to change in small ways that escalated gradually. Marcus started getting jealous when I mentioned male coworkers or friends. He'd ask detailed questions about who I'd talked to during my shift and what we'd talked about and whether any men had been flirting with me. At first, it seemed like normal relationship stuff, like he cared and wanted to be involved in my life. But then it became interrogation. He'd get angry if I didn't remember exact details of conversations, or if my story didn't match what he thought it should be. He started checking my phone when I was in the shower or sleeping, reading my texts and my emails and my social media messages. When I confronted him about it, he said he was just making sure I wasn't hiding anything from him, that people in relationships should be completely transparent with each other. He made me feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting privacy. He started showing up at the hospital unannounced during my shifts, claiming he was just in the neighborhood or wanted to bring me lunch, but really he was checking to make sure I was actually at work and not somewhere else with someone else. My coworkers noticed and started making comments about how attentive my boyfriend was, but I could see in their eyes that they thought it was weird and controlling. By the 3rd year, Marcus's control had extended to every part of my life, and the violence had started. He controlled what I wore, saying certain outfits were too revealing or would attract unwanted attention. He controlled who I spent time with, isolating me from friends he deemed bad influences. He controlled my schedule, getting angry if I wanted to do anything that didn't include him or that he hadn't approved in advance. And when I tried to push back or set boundaries or assert any independence, he'd get violent. It started with grabbing my arms too hard during arguments, leaving bruises I'd cover with long sleeves. Then it escalated to pushing me or shoving me when he was angry. Then one night, during a particularly bad argument about me going out with coworkers after our shift, Marcus slapped me across the face hard enough that my ear rang for hours. I was shocked, and he was immediately apologetic, crying and saying he was so sorry he'd never do it again. He didn't know what came over him. I just made him so angry when I didn't listen to reasonable concerns about my safety. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe it was a one-time thing, but it wasn't. 3 weeks later, he punched me during another argument, giving me a black eye that I had to lie about at work, saying I'd walked into a cabinet door in the middle of the night. I could see in my coworkers' eyes that they didn't believe me, but no one pushed too hard, and I was grateful not to have to admit the truth. I knew I needed to leave Marcus, but I was genuinely terrified of what would happen if I tried. Marcus had told me explicitly and repeatedly that if I ever tried to leave him, he would find me wherever I went, and he would make me regret it in ways I couldn't imagine. He said he'd hurt me so badly I'd wish I was dead. He said he'd hurt my family if I ran to them for help. He said I belonged to him, that I was his, that no one left him because he didn't allow it. The threats were specific enough that I believed he'd follow through. But after the second time he punched me, after I looked at my bruised, swollen face in the bathroom mirror and realized this pattern would only continue and probably get worse until he seriously injured me or killed me, I decided I had to risk leaving. I made a careful plan. I waited until Marcus had to travel out of town for a work conference, 3 days where I knew he'd be gone and couldn't immediately come after me. I called in sick to work for those 3 days. I packed 2 large bags with essentials, my important documents, things I couldn't replace. I cleaned out my half of our shared bank account and opened a new account at a different bank in just my name. I blocked Marcus's number on my phone. I moved in with my coworker Sarah Johnson, who'd been expressing concern about my relationship for months, and who lived across town in an apartment complex Marcus didn't know about. I thought I'd gotten away clean, that I'd escaped before he even realized I was gone. Marcus started looking for me immediately when he got back from his trip and found me gone. He went to my workplace at the hospital, but I'd already requested a transfer to a different location across the city that my supervisor had approved given the circumstances. He contacted my friends, but I'd warned the few I still had after his isolation to not tell him anything about where I was. He showed up at my parents' house demanding to know where I was, but they called the police and he left before they arrived. For 2 whole weeks, I started to believe maybe he'd given up, maybe he'd accepted it was over and moved on. Then one night, I was working a late shift at the new hospital location, and when I got off at midnight and walked to my car in the parking garage, Marcus was there waiting by my car. I don't know how he'd found out where I was working. Maybe he'd followed me. Maybe he'd called around to different hospitals. Maybe he'd convinced someone to tell him. But there he was, and my blood ran cold when I saw him leaning against my car with his arms crossed. He followed me from my car through the garage as I tried to walk quickly toward where there might be more people or security, calling my name, saying we needed to talk, saying I couldn't just leave him without a proper explanation, saying I owed him that much after 3 years. I tried to ignore him and walk faster, but he caught up to me easily and grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. "We need to talk, Natalie. You can't just run away from this." When I tried to pull away, he gripped tighter, and that's when I started running, and he started chasing me, and that's when the motorcycle with Dominic appeared out of nowhere like some kind of dark guardian angel. The writer who rescued me that night introduced himself as Dominic Kane after we'd stopped under that streetlight and I'd caught my breath enough to think clearly. He was 32 years old, tall and muscular, with dark hair and those intense eyes that seemed to see right through people. He owned a private security company that specialized in executive protection and personal safety, he told me. He rode a motorcycle everywhere because it was faster than cars in city traffic, and he liked the freedom of it. He had the kind of commanding presence that made people step back and give him space. The kind of energy that said, "Don't mess with me or there will be consequences." After the adrenaline of the chase had worn off enough for me to speak coherently, Dominic asked me what was going on, and I explained quickly about Marcus and the relationship, and the abuse, and my recent escape, and being found and followed. Dominic's expression as I talked got very serious and very cold, in a way that was both reassuring and slightly frightening. He asked me where I was currently staying and said he'd make sure I got there safely without being followed. He gave me a business card with his security company information and told me to call him if I had any more problems with my ex. Then he followed me on his motorcycle all the way across the city to Sarah's apartment building and waited in the parking lot until he saw me get safely inside before he left. I thought that would be the end of our interaction, a random Good Samaritan on a motorcycle who'd helped me in a dangerous moment and then disappeared back into his own life. But the very next morning, Dominic showed up at Sarah's apartment with expensive coffee from the artisan shop down the street and a box of fresh pastries. He said he'd been up all night thinking about my situation, and he was genuinely concerned about my safety. He explained that he ran a security company and dealt with situations exactly like mine all the time, stalker exes and domestic violence cases where people were in real danger. He said he'd seen too many of these situations end badly and tragically because the victim didn't have proper protection or didn't take the threat seriously enough until it was too late. He offered his professional security services to me completely free of charge, saying he couldn't, in good conscience, charge someone who was clearly in danger and just trying to stay alive and rebuild their life. Against what probably should have been my better judgment, I agreed to let Dominic help me with security. Sarah expressed some reservations about accepting help from someone I'd just met the night before, but I argued that he was a professional who dealt with this stuff for a living, and he was offering help I desperately needed and couldn't afford to pay for otherwise. That decision to accept Dominic's help was my first serious mistake in this whole situation. The help and protection Dominic provided started out seeming very reasonable and appropriate for someone dealing with a stalker ex. Dominic would check in with me once a day via text to make sure I was safe and that Marcus hadn't tried to contact me or approach me. He gave me a personal safety alarm that would emit a loud sound if I activated it and would automatically alert me to my location. He taught me some basic self-defense moves in case Marcus cornered me somewhere and I needed to get away. He helped me navigate the legal process of filing for a restraining order against Marcus, explaining what evidence I'd need and what to expect at the hearing. He even came with me to the actual restraining order hearing for moral support, sitting in the back of the courtroom and giving me a reassuring nod when I looked back nervously before testifying. When the judge granted a temporary restraining order for 6 months, Dominic seemed almost as relieved and pleased as I was. But then, very gradually, in ways I didn't fully recognize as problematic at the time, the help and protection started escalating and becoming more invasive and controlling. Dominic started wanting me to text him not just once a day, but whenever I left Sarah's apartment and when I arrived anywhere. He wanted my complete work schedule so he could make sure someone, usually him, was watching the hospital parking garage during my shifts to ensure Marcus wasn't lurking around. He started showing up at places I was going, even when I hadn't told him I'd be there, saying he was just doing security sweeps of the area to make sure everything was safe. When I mentioned I was going to grab dinner with Sarah one evening, Dominic would appear at the restaurant to check the exits and the parking lot, and to make sure no one suspicious was around. When I went grocery shopping, Dominic would be in the parking lot when I came out with my bags, saying he'd been in the area and wanted to make sure Marcus wasn't following me or waiting by my car. It felt intrusive and excessive, but every single time I tried to push back or suggest that maybe this level of vigilance wasn't necessary, Dominic would remind me very seriously that Marcus had already violated the restraining order twice by trying to contact me through text messages from burner phones he'd bought specifically to get around my blocking him. Dominic would point out very reasonably that I was still in legitimate danger and that his constant vigilance was probably the only thing keeping me safe from someone who'd explicitly threatened to hurt me. And the awful truth was that I was genuinely still scared of Marcus and what he might do, and I was grateful to have someone like Dominic who seemed competent and professional protecting me. About 2 months into this security arrangement, Dominic and I transitioned from a professional protector-client relationship into a romantic relationship. It happened gradually and naturally through all the time we were spending together and the intensity of the dangerous situation I was in. Dominic was undeniably attractive with his dark good looks and his commanding presence. He was attentive to my needs and my fears in ways that felt caring and genuine. He made me feel safe in ways I desperately needed after years with Marcus. We started having dinner together regularly after my evening shifts at the hospital, talking for hours about our lives and our pasts and our dreams. He'd take me on long motorcycle rides through the city and into the countryside that felt thrilling and free, and like I was finally living again instead of just surviving. He was charming and romantic in a way that felt different from Marcus's early charm, more mature and confident, and less performative. He seemed genuinely invested in my well-being and my recovery from the trauma Marcus had put me through. The relationship moved very fast, probably much faster than was healthy or wise, given how vulnerable I was and how recently I'd escaped an abusive relationship. But I was in a fragile state, and Dominic was there, and it felt so right at the time. Within 3 months of first meeting Dominic on that dramatic night in the parking garage, I'd moved out of Sarah's apartment and into Dominic's loft downtown. He said it made sense from a security perspective, since his building had much better security than Sarah's complex, with cameras and a doorman and controlled access. He argued that he could protect me much better if we were living together, and he didn't have to constantly drive across the city to check on me. Sarah expressed significant concern about how fast things were moving and whether I was making good decisions while still traumatized from Marcus. But I told her, somewhat defensively, that I was happy and safe, and that was what mattered most. I didn't see or didn't want to see the warning signs that were already visible if I'd been willing to look at them clearly. Dominic's protection and care started feeling more and more like control as the weeks passed. He wanted to know where I was every single moment of every single day, texting me constantly when we weren't together. He'd get noticeably upset and cold if I didn't text him back immediately when he messaged me. He started having strong opinions about what I wore, suggesting that certain outfits might attract unwanted attention or might make me a target. He had thoughts about who I spent time with, expressing distrust of several of my coworkers, and subtly discouraging me from hanging out with them after shifts. He didn't like Sarah and made spending time with her difficult by always having security concerns or scheduling conflicts when I wanted to see her. He didn't think I should go out socially with coworkers after our shifts because it wasn't safe to be out late and Marcus could be watching and waiting for an opportunity. He started suggesting pretty seriously that I should quit my job at the hospital entirely and come work for his security company doing administrative work, where he could keep me close and protected at all times. Whenever I pushed back on any of these suggestions or restrictions, Dominic would frame everything in terms of my safety from Marcus. "I'm just trying to keep you safe from someone who explicitly threatened to kill you. Don't you want to be safe? After everything you've been through with that monster, why are you fighting the protection I'm offering you?" The manipulation was subtle enough that I didn't recognize it as manipulation for a long time. About 4 months into living with Dominic in his loft downtown and working at his security company office instead of at the hospital where I'd spent years building my career and professional relationships, I started to realize with growing horror and shame that I'd made a terrible, catastrophic mistake. I'd escaped from Marcus's obvious, brutal control straight into Dominic's more subtle, sophisticated control, essentially trading one prison for another prison with nicer furniture and better security systems.
The methods the two men used were different on the surface, but the underlying dynamic of domination and possession was frighteningly and depressingly similar. Both Marcus and Dominic had this deep need to know where I was at every single moment of every single day, requiring constant check-ins and updates about my location and activities. Both had systematically isolated me from friends and family members who might have noticed what was happening and tried to help or intervene. Both made major life decisions about things like where I worked and who I spent time with and how I spent my free time without actually consulting me or seriously considering my input or preferences. Both got noticeably angry and cold and withdrawn when I tried to assert even the smallest amount of independence or autonomy, or tried to make decisions about my own life.
The main significant difference between Marcus and Dominic was that Dominic was so much better at disguising his pathological need for control as concern and protection for my safety from a legitimate external threat, which made it much harder to recognize the pattern and much harder to argue against without seeming ungrateful or self-destructive. Living with Dominic, I noticed patterns that should have alarmed me much earlier than they did. He'd go through my phone regularly when I was in the shower or asleep, just like Marcus had done, reading my texts and emails and checking my call history. When I confronted him about this invasion of privacy, Dominic would say he was just making sure Marcus wasn't trying to contact me through new numbers or through other people, that it was part of keeping me safe and I should want him to be thorough about my security. He'd criticize my clothing choices in ways that echoed Marcus, saying certain outfits were too attention-getting or might make me a target for Marcus's obsessive behavior. He'd question my friendships and working relationships in ways designed to make me doubt those connections and eventually cut them off. He'd make plans for both of us without checking my schedule or asking if I wanted to participate, just assuming I'd be available and compliant. He'd get upset if I made any plans that didn't include him or that he hadn't approved in advance. The isolation that Dominic created was particularly effective because it happened gradually and was always framed as being about my safety. Sarah had been my closest friend and the person who'd taken me in when I left Marcus, but Dominic steadily made it harder and harder for me to maintain that friendship. He'd point out that Sarah lived in an unsecured apartment building where Marcus could easily stake out and wait for me to visit. He'd schedule things during times I'd planned to see Sarah, and then act hurt if I tried to keep my original plans. He'd criticize Sarah's judgment and her lifestyle choices in subtle ways that planted seeds of doubt about whether she was really a good friend or a good influence. Within a few months of living with Dominic, I was barely talking to Sarah at all, which meant I'd lost my main outside perspective on my relationship with Dominic and my main potential source of help if I needed to escape. My relationship with my family deteriorated similarly under Dominic's influence. My parents lived 3 hours away, and I'd always been close with them and talked to them regularly, but Dominic made those conversations and visits increasingly difficult. He'd hover during phone calls home, listening to my side of the conversation and asking detailed questions afterward about what we'd discussed. He'd express concern that my parents didn't really understand the danger I was in from Marcus and might inadvertently put me at risk by sharing information about me with the wrong people. He'd suggest that I shouldn't tell my parents too much about my current situation because it would just worry them unnecessarily. When I wanted to visit them, Dominic would identify security concerns with the trip or schedule conflicts, or he'd insist on coming with me and staying the entire time, which made what should have been relaxing family time into something stressful and awkward. The control extended to my work life as well, once I'd made the decision to leave my hospital nursing job to work for Dominic's security company.
He'd convinced me this was the safer choice, that working at the hospital put me at predictable locations at predictable times where Marcus could find me, whereas working at Dominic's office meant I was always around security professionals who could protect me. What it actually meant was that Dominic controlled my income and my daily schedule and could monitor my activities throughout the entire workday. He'd know exactly where I was during business hours because I was in his office. He'd know who I talked to because those people were his employees. He had access to my work computer and my work email. I had no privacy and no independence in my professional life. The financial control was also significant and should have alarmed me. I was living in Dominic's loft rent-free, which seemed generous, but also meant I had no lease in my name and no legal right to stay there if Dominic decided he wanted me gone. I was working for his company at a salary he determined and could change or eliminate at any time. I had given up the financial independence and stability I'd built through years of nursing work. If I wanted to leave Dominic, I'd have to find a new job and a new place to live simultaneously, which felt overwhelming and nearly impossible, which was probably part of the point. The breaking point that finally made me see the situation clearly came when I told Dominic I wanted to visit my parents for a long weekend. They'd been asking me to come home for months, and I'd been making excuses, but I finally decided I needed to see them, needed some time away from Dominic and the intensity of our relationship, needed some perspective from people who loved me and knew me before all of this happened.
I told Dominic I'd be gone from Friday evening through Monday morning, just 3 days with my family. Dominic's reaction was immediate and revealed the full extent of his need for control. He said it absolutely was not safe for me to travel that far outside his protection radius, that Marcus could follow me on the highway and force me off the road in some isolated area, that I'd be vulnerable and unprotected. He said if I really needed to see my parents that badly, he would drive me there himself and stay with me the entire weekend to ensure my safety. When I pushed back and said I needed to make this trip alone, that I needed some independence and some time with just my family without him there monitoring everything, Dominic's expression went cold and hard in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of Marcus. "You want independence from me?" he said, his voice icy. "After everything I've done to protect you and keep you alive? After I've completely disrupted my life and my business to focus on keeping you safe? You want space from me? Maybe you should just go back to Marcus if you don't appreciate the protection I'm providing. See how that works out for you." That moment was a revelation. I saw with sudden, painful clarity exactly what Dominic was doing and had been doing since the night he rescued me. He was using my legitimate fear of Marcus, using the very real threat that Marcus posed as a weapon to control every aspect of my life. He was keeping me in a constant state of fear and anxiety so that I would accept his restrictions and his monitoring without questioning it too much. And the particularly insidious thing was that Marcus actually still was dangerous. The restraining order hadn't stopped him from trying to contact me. He'd violated it multiple times and had even been arrested once, though he'd been released quickly. So Dominic's warnings weren't entirely fabricated, which made them much more effective at keeping me compliant. I realized I needed to leave Dominic as soon as possible, but I had to be extraordinarily careful and strategic about how I did it, because he was a security professional who knew all the standard methods people used to escape dangerous situations. I was living in his apartment with no lease in my own name and no legal right to be there. I'd quit my nursing job at the hospital to work for his company, where he controlled my paycheck and my employment. I'd allowed myself to become almost completely isolated from friends like Sarah and from my family. I was deeply financially dependent on him for housing and income and basic survival. I was trapped in almost exactly the same way I'd been trapped with Marcus, just with different specific details. I started planning my second major escape very carefully and methodically over several weeks, being extremely cautious not to tip Dominic off about what I was thinking or planning.
I reached out to Sarah secretly from a computer at the public library, during a time when I'd told Dominic I was running errands and picking up groceries. I explained to Sarah everything that had been happening over the past months, how Dominic's protection had transformed into control, how isolated and trapped I felt, how I needed help getting away from him. Sarah said absolutely her couch was still available and that she'd been worried sick about me for months because I'd seemed increasingly distant and unlike myself. I contacted my former supervisor at the hospital through the same library computer and asked very carefully and somewhat vaguely if there might be any nursing positions available, explaining that my current work situation wasn't working out as well as I'd hoped. She responded immediately, saying they would love to have me back on staff and could start me as soon as I was ready to return, which felt like a lifeline being thrown to me. I started saving small amounts of money from my paychecks in a separate bank account that Dominic didn't know existed, an account I'd opened online using the library computer. I'd claim I was spending money on coffee or lunch or small personal purchases and then deposit that money instead. It was only $20 or $30 at a time, but it added up over weeks to a few $100s that would give me some resources if I needed to leave quickly. And then, one day, when Dominic had back-to-back client meetings scheduled that I knew would keep him out of the loft for most of the afternoon and evening, I executed my plan. I packed my essential belongings as quickly as I could, my important documents and medications, and a few changes of clothes and the items that had sentimental meaning. I left Dominic a handwritten note on the kitchen counter saying I appreciated everything he'd done to help me when I was in danger, but I needed to live my own life and make my own choices now, and I was sorry for any hurt this caused. Then I blocked his number on my phone and called an Uber to take me to Sarah's apartment across the city. Dominic did not take my departure well at all. He showed up at Sarah's apartment building within just a few hours, having somehow figured out where I'd gone despite my attempts at secrecy.
He pounded on Sarah's door hard enough that neighbors came out of their apartments to see what was happening. He was shouting that I was making a huge mistake, that I was putting myself in danger, that I'd regret leaving his protection. Sarah called the police immediately, and they arrived and made Dominic leave, but not before he'd caused a major scene that left me shaking and terrified. Over the next days and weeks, Dominic sent me literally hundreds of text messages and tried calling dozens and dozens of times. Even though I'd blocked his number, I could see the notifications piling up showing blocked calls and messages. He showed up at the hospital where I'd gotten my old nursing job back, trying to corner me in the parking garage, the very same garage where he'd first rescued me from Marcus in what now felt like a lifetime ago. Each time Dominic tried to contact me or approach me, I refused to engage at all and immediately called security or the police, depending on the location. Then Dominic did something that I absolutely had not anticipated, and that showed me just how dangerous and vindictive he actually was beneath his protective, caring facade. He contacted Marcus and deliberately told him where I was living and working. I don't know the exact details of what Dominic told Marcus or how he framed the information, but the result was that Marcus suddenly started showing up everywhere I went after months of having mostly left me alone. At the grocery store where I did my weekly shopping, outside Sarah's apartment building at odd hours, in the parking lot near the hospital. The pattern and timing suggested very clearly that someone had given Marcus detailed current information about my location and my schedule and my routine. The irony and the cruelty of Dominic's action made me feel physically ill. The man who had positioned himself as my rescuer and my protector from my dangerous ex-boyfriend was now actively and deliberately putting me in danger by providing that same dangerous ex-boyfriend with information about where to find me and when. Dominic had claimed his entire relationship with me was about keeping me safe from Marcus, and now he was weaponizing Marcus against me as punishment for asserting my independence and leaving. I filed for restraining orders against both Marcus and Dominic simultaneously. The court hearings were surreal and emotionally draining. I had to sit in that courtroom and try to explain to a judge who initially looked confused and skeptical how the man who had initially helped me escape from an abusive situation had himself become abusive and controlling and was now actively collaborating with my original abuser to harass and threaten and stalk me. I presented evidence, including text messages and emails and testimony from Sarah about Dominic's behavior and the escalating control. The judge's expression became more serious and concerned as the evidence piled up and the pattern became clear. The judge granted temporary restraining orders against both men. Both Marcus and Dominic were legally required to stay at least 500 feet away from me, from my home, from my workplace, from anywhere they had reason to believe I would be. Violation of the orders would result in immediate arrest and criminal charges, including potential jail time. The restraining orders had very different effects on the two men and their behavior. Marcus, after being arrested twice more for violations and spending substantial time in jail where the reality of consequences finally seemed to sink in, ultimately got the message and stopped trying to contact me or find me. But Dominic was much more persistent and much more sophisticated in his ongoing harassment. He didn't violate the restraining order directly or in ways that could be easily proven in court. Instead, he hired people from his security company, employees and contractors who worked for him and felt loyal to him or dependent on him for employment, to follow me and surveil me and report back to him about my movements and activities and who I spent time with. I started noticing the same car behind me on multiple different days and routes. I'd see the same unfamiliar person in the coffee shop I went to before work, and then again at the grocery store, and then loitering near Sarah's apartment building. When I reported these incidents and this pattern to the police, they would investigate and sometimes even question the people involved, but they could never quite prove the connection back to Dominic. He was always one step removed from the actual surveillance, using intermediaries and maintaining plausible deniability. This ongoing pattern of being followed and watched and monitored went on for several months, and it was absolutely exhausting and terrifying and demoralizing. The constant feeling of being surveilled and having no privacy, the paranoia about whether any given stranger I encountered was actually just a random person or someone Dominic had sent to watch me and report back, the fear that either Dominic or Marcus would eventually escalate beyond just watching and monitoring to something more dangerous or violent or directly threatening.
I was living in a constant state of hypervigilance, constantly looking over my shoulder, constantly feeling fundamentally unsafe in the world despite all the legal protections I'd managed to obtain. The situation finally resolved in a way I never could have predicted or planned for. One of Dominic's employees, a young guy probably in his mid-20s named Jake, who'd been assigned to follow me and document my activities and whereabouts, approached me one day outside the hospital after my shift ended. He looked nervous and guilty. He said he was completely done working for Dominic and wanted to help me instead. He explained that what Dominic was asking him to do, asking all of his surveillance team to do, was illegal and unethical and violated the restraining order I'd obtained, and he couldn't keep participating in it. He felt increasingly guilty about his role in surveilling and harassing me and wanted to make things right if he could. Jake gave me incredibly detailed logs and documentation of all the surveillance Dominic had ordered over the past months. The logs included specific dates and times and locations, and even direct quotes from the instructions Dominic had given about what to watch for and what to report back about. Jake gave me copies of text messages between himself and Dominic, arranging surveillance shifts and discussing my movements. He gave me the names of other employees who'd been involved in the surveillance operation. He gave me everything, basically handing me the evidence I needed to prove definitively that Dominic was behind all of it and was systematically violating the restraining order through proxies. I took all of that extensive evidence to the police, and they took it very seriously this time. They arrested Dominic and charged him with multiple counts of stalking, harassment, and violating a restraining order. With the detailed documentation that Jake had provided and Jake's willingness to testify, the charges actually stuck in a way they might not have otherwise. Dominic went to trial and was convicted after Jake and several other former employees testified about what Dominic had asked them to do and how he'd framed it, and what he'd told them about me. Dominic was sentenced to 2 years in jail plus an additional 3 years of probation after his release. The restraining order against him was extended for 10 full years. Finally, after everything, I was genuinely safe. Now, 2 full years after all of this chaos and trauma, after escaping from Marcus and then Dominic, and finally finding actual legitimate safety and stability, I'm living a life that feels like it's genuinely and authentically mine for the first time in many years. I have my own small apartment that I pay for with money I earn from my nursing job at the hospital, doing work I find meaningful. I have real, genuine friendships with people like Sarah, who stood by me through absolutely everything and never gave up on me. I'm in ongoing weekly therapy working through the complex layers of trauma from experiencing back-to-back abusive relationships with different types of abusers using different methods. I'm learning gradually to trust my own instincts and judgment again after having them undermined and manipulated for so long. The therapy I've been doing for the past 2 years has been absolutely essential to my recovery and understanding of what happened to me. I see a therapist named Dr. Jennifer Martinez twice a week, sometimes more during difficult periods, and she specializes in trauma from intimate partner violence and complex PTSD from repeated abuse. One of the first things Dr. Martinez helped me understand was that what I experienced wasn't just bad luck or me making poor choices repeatedly, but rather a pattern where traumatized people sometimes end up in similar situations over and over because trauma fundamentally changes how we evaluate risk and trust. When I escaped from Marcus after 3 years of escalating abuse and violence, I was in such a vulnerable state, so desperate for safety and protection and someone to make me feel secure that I couldn't properly evaluate whether Dominic's help was genuinely altruistic or whether he had his own agenda and needs that he was fulfilling through helping me. The fear and trauma from Marcus made me susceptible to someone like Dominic, who positioned himself as the perfect solution to all my fear. Dr. Martinez also helped me recognize the specific manipulation tactics that both men used and understand how remarkably similar they actually were underneath the surface differences in presentation. Both men used systematic isolation as a key tool to cut me off from outside perspectives that might have helped me see what was happening more clearly. Both used fear as their primary control mechanism, though Marcus created fear through direct threats and violence, while Dominic used my existing fear of Marcus as leverage to justify his restrictions. Both escalated their control gradually and incrementally, so I didn't notice how bad things had gotten until I was thoroughly trapped with no easy way out.
Both made me systematically doubt my own perceptions and instincts, convincing me over time that their version of reality was more accurate than my own lived experience. Understanding these patterns intellectually through therapy has helped somewhat, but the deeper work has been healing the emotional and psychological damage that the abuse created in my sense of self and my ability to trust. I struggle profoundly with trust in almost every relationship now. It's genuinely hard to accept help from anyone without wondering what they want in return or what control they're trying to exert over me. It's difficult to form new relationships, whether friendships or romantic connections, when I'm constantly analyzing people's behavior for potential red flags and early signs of manipulation or control. It's challenging to trust my own judgment about people and situations after being so spectacularly wrong about both Marcus and Dominic, after missing or deliberately ignoring warning signs that seem painfully obvious now in retrospect. Dr. Martinez has been teaching me that healing doesn't mean I'll ever go back to exactly who I was before Marcus and Dominic entered my life. I'm fundamentally and permanently changed by what I experienced, and that's something I need to accept rather than fight against. But healing does mean I can integrate those experiences and the lessons they taught me without being completely controlled by them, that I can use what I learned to protect myself and make better choices without becoming so closed off and suspicious that I can't have any meaningful connections or accept any help from anyone ever again. The hypervigilance that developed from being constantly monitored and followed and surveilled for so many months has been one of the hardest and most persistent symptoms to manage in my recovery. I'm constantly scanning my environment for potential threats and dangers. I notice every single car that's been behind me for more than a few blocks, and I track their movements obsessively. I track faces of people in public spaces, like grocery stores or coffee shops, to see if they appear in multiple locations, which might indicate surveillance. I check my apartment obsessively multiple times before bed to make sure no one's been inside or tampered with anything. I vary my routes and my routines constantly to make myself harder to track or predict. These behaviors and this constant vigilance made complete sense when I was actually being actively stalked and surveilled by Dominic's employees, but they've continued long after both Marcus and Dominic are legally prohibited from coming near me, and Dominic is literally in prison, unable to hurt me. The anxiety and the mental energy required for this constant vigilance is absolutely exhausting and impacts every aspect of my daily life. Dr. Martinez has been helping me gradually reduce these safety behaviors that have become compulsive rather than protective, helping me learn to tolerate the discomfort and uncertainty of not constantly checking and monitoring my environment, helping me slowly rebuild a sense of safety in the world that isn't dependent on perfect vigilance and control. The financial recovery and rebuilding has been another significant piece of healing that often gets overlooked in discussions of recovering from abuse, but that's been critically important for me. I lost years of career progression and professional development and savings during my time with Marcus and then with Dominic. When I finally escaped from both of them, I had to rebuild my professional life essentially from scratch, from a position of significant disadvantage. Coming back to the hospital after leaving Dominic meant starting over in many ways, reestablishing my reputation as a reliable, competent nurse, rebuilding my skills that had atrophied during the time I wasn't working in healthcare, proving my reliability after the inconsistency during the abuse. I've been very deliberate and strategic about rebuilding my financial independence and stability because I never want to be in a position again where I'm financially trapped with someone and literally can't leave because I don't have the resources. I keep my own apartment with a lease in only my name that no one else has access to or control over. I maintain my own bank accounts that no one else has access to or even knows about. I live significantly below my means and save aggressively to build up an emergency fund that could support me through any crisis or sudden need to relocate. I'm extremely careful about any financial entanglements with anyone else, keeping my money and my financial life completely separate and independent from everyone. That level of financial independence and isolation has a real cost in terms of limiting certain opportunities or relationships that might require more financial interdependence, but it's a price I'm absolutely willing to pay for the security and autonomy and freedom it provides me. The process of rebuilding my social connections and friendships has also been gradual and intentional and sometimes painful. Sarah has been an absolutely constant and unwavering support through everything, and I'm grateful for her friendship in ways I can barely express or articulate.
But I've also had to systematically rebuild other friendships that withered and died during my time with Marcus and then with Dominic. Friendships with people who pulled away when I became increasingly distant and isolated, or who I actively cut off because my abusers demanded it or made maintaining those friendships impossible. Reaching back out to those people after so much time and so much damage, and explaining what had happened and asking if we could try to reconnect and rebuild has been incredibly humbling and difficult. Some of those friendships couldn't be repaired because the damage was too extensive or too much time had passed, or people had simply moved on with their lives and didn't want to revisit that painful period. But some of those friendships have been rebuilt and are actually stronger than before because we've been able to talk openly and honestly about what happened and what I need now to feel safe in friendships. I've also been very intentional about building completely new friendships and social connections that aren't tied to my past or my trauma at all. Relationships where people know me as who I am now, rather than as someone who survived abuse or as a victim. Those fresh start friendships have been healing in different ways because I'm not constantly explaining or justifying or apologizing for my past or my current anxiety and hypervigilance and trust issues. Dating and romantic relationships remain an area I'm still actively working on with Dr. Martinez and honestly haven't made much progress on.
How do you open yourself up to romantic connection and intimacy and vulnerability after 2 consecutive serious relationships where romance and intimacy became weapons that were used to control and manipulate and hurt you? How do you trust someone with that level of closeness and vulnerability when the last 2 people you trusted that deeply systematically used it against you in really damaging ways? I tried dating briefly about a year ago, and it was an absolute disaster of anxiety and hypervigilance and complete inability to just be present and enjoy getting to know someone new without constantly analyzing their every word and action for potential signs of control or manipulation or hidden agendas. So I've taken a complete step back from dating entirely for now, focusing instead on continuing my healing work and building other types of meaningful connections and relationships. Dr. Martinez says that when I'm truly ready, dating will be possible again and potentially deeply fulfilling, but that there's absolutely no rush and I should move at whatever pace feels right and safe for me rather than following some external timeline or societal expectation about what I should be doing at my age. I've also done extensive, difficult work around forgiving myself for what I still sometimes see as terrible mistakes and failures of judgment, for staying with Marcus as long as I did despite the escalating violence, for not recognizing the abuse sooner with both men, for accepting Dominic's help in the first place when Sarah expressed reservations, for moving in with him so quickly when I was still so vulnerable, for not trusting my instincts earlier when I felt uncomfortable with his level of control. The self-blame and self-criticism have been deeply corrosive to my sense of self and my confidence, and Dr. Martinez has been helping me replace that harsh self-judgment with self-compassion and genuine understanding. I made the absolute best decisions I could with the information and emotional resources and support I had available at each specific point in time. Both Marcus and Dominic were highly skilled manipulators who deliberately and strategically worked to undermine my judgment and my trust in myself and my perceptions. I'm not stupid or weak or defective for being manipulated and controlled by people who were exceptionally good at manipulation and control. I'm a survivor who managed to get out of 2 extremely dangerous situations despite significant obstacles and very real risks to my safety. The biggest lesson I learned is that danger and control can come disguised as protection and help. Dominic presented himself as my savior, when really he was just a different kind of threat who was better at hiding his controlling behavior behind concern and security. The warning signs were there if I'd been able to see them. The immediate intensity of his involvement, the way he made himself indispensable, the escalation from reasonable security to invasive monitoring, the isolation from support systems, the anger when I asserted independence. All the same patterns as Marcus, but dressed up as protection. If you're escaping a dangerous situation, be very careful about who you accept help from and what strings are attached. Real help respects your autonomy and doesn't require giving up control of your life. Real protection doesn't require constant surveillance or isolation or dependence. There are legitimate resources for people leaving abusive relationships, shelters and advocates and counseling that provide support without taking over your life. Use those instead of accepting help from individuals who want to be your personal savior.
If someone is using your fear to control you, even if that fear is legitimate, they're not helping you. They're exploiting your vulnerability. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't let someone convince you that your discomfort is paranoia or ingratitude. For anyone in a situation where protection has become control, where your rescuer has become your captor, know that you can leave. Document everything. Reach out to official resources, make a safety plan, and when you're ready, walk away. Looking forward, I'm cautiously optimistic about my future. I have a career doing meaningful work. I have my own safe space. I have genuine friendships and family connections. I have autonomy over my own life. These things that most people take for granted feel precious to me after losing them completely. I know I'll probably always carry scars from what I experienced. The hypervigilance may never completely disappear. The trust issues will likely always be part of how I relate to people.
The awareness that danger can hide behind masks of protection will probably always make me more cautious than someone who hasn't lived through this. But I'm building a good life despite, and maybe because of, what I survived. I'm stronger and more aware and more deliberate about my choices and boundaries. I know what I won't tolerate, and I'm willing to walk away when lines are crossed. I value my freedom in ways I never did before I lost it. 2 years out from escaping both men, I can say with confidence that recovery is possible, even after multiple abusive relationships. The work of healing is hard and ongoing, but it's worth it. I'm making progress. I make my own decisions about where I go and who I see and how I spend my time. That autonomy feels precious and hard-won. The impact on my relationship with my family has also required significant attention and healing work over these 2 years. My parents felt tremendous guilt for not recognizing what was happening with Marcus and then with Dominic, for not pushing harder when I pulled away, for not asking more difficult questions when I seemed different or made excuses about why I couldn't visit. We've had to have multiple emotionally difficult conversations about their role, however unintentional, in my isolation during both relationships. They've had to learn how to support me in recovery without being overprotective or treating me like I'm fragile or making decisions for me, which would just be another form of control. We're learning together how to have a relationship that's supportive and connected while also respecting my autonomy and my right to make my own choices, even when they worry. The relationship is different now than before, shaped by trauma, but also deeper because we communicate more honestly. Looking forward, I'm cautiously optimistic about my future in ways I couldn't have imagined when trapped with Marcus or Dominic. I have a career doing meaningful work. I have my own safe space that no one controls. I have genuine friendships and family connections. I have autonomy over my life. These things most people take for granted feel precious to me after losing them completely. I know I'll probably always carry scars from what I experienced. The hypervigilance may never completely disappear. The trust issues will likely always be part of how I relate to people. The awareness that danger can hide behind masks of protection will probably always make me more cautious than someone who hasn't lived through this. But I'm building a good life despite, and maybe because of, what I survived. I'm stronger and more aware and more deliberate about my choices and boundaries. I know what I won't tolerate, and I'm willing to walk away when lines are crossed. I value my freedom in ways I never did before I lost it. If you're reading this and recognizing patterns from your own life, if you've escaped one dangerous situation only to find yourself in another that seemed different but had the same underlying control dynamic, please know you're not alone and you're not stupid. You can get out and build a life that's genuinely yours. It takes time and resources and support and courage, but it's absolutely possible. People do it successfully every day. Reach out for help from professional resources specializing in domestic violence. Document everything happening with dates and times. Make a comprehensive safety plan. Trust yourself even when others tell you not to. And when you're ready, leave and don't look back, no matter what promises or threats are made. You deserve freedom and real safety and complete autonomy and a life that's fully yours to shape. I want to end by talking about something that doesn't get discussed enough, which is the challenge of recognizing abuse when it comes disguised as rescue or protection. We're socialized to be grateful for help, to trust protectors, to see rescue as inherently good. Those scripts made it harder for me to recognize that Dominic's protection was actually control. If someone rescues you, if they invest in keeping you safe, you feel indebted in ways that make it difficult to question their motives. That indebtedness is something abusers deliberately cultivate. Dominic knew that by rescuing me, he was creating a dynamic where I'd feel obliged to accept his help and defer to his judgment.
That initial rescue gave him access and credibility and power he then used to control my life. This dynamic happens in other contexts too. Employers who rescue employees from financial trouble then demand excessive loyalty. Family members who help during crisis then use it as leverage. Friends who position themselves as saviors then expect complete deference. The pattern is the same, using help as a tool to create obligation that can be exploited for control. Recognizing this pattern and being willing to question even help that seems genuine is something I wish I'd been better at from the beginning. I wish I'd understood that accepting help doesn't mean giving up your fundamental right to boundaries and autonomy. I wish I'd known that genuine helpers truly respect your independence and don't use help as leverage. I wish I'd recognized sooner that Dominic's help came with invisible strings, carefully designed to tie me to him in ways that would be hard to break free from. If you're in a situation right now where someone has helped or rescued you and you're feeling increasingly controlled or obligated or trapped, please examine that relationship very carefully and honestly. Ask yourself whether the help respects your autonomy or systematically undermines it. Notice whether you're actually gaining independence and stability or becoming progressively more dependent on this one person. Pay close attention to how you genuinely feel in the relationship, whether you feel grateful and supported and empowered, or whether you feel obligated and trapped and like you can't make your own choices anymore. Real, genuine help empowers you to rebuild your own life on your own terms. False help that's really hidden control creates dependence and progressively restricts your choices while constantly claiming to protect you. The difference between these two types of help matters enormously, and recognizing it early can potentially save you years of additional trauma and manipulation. If this story resonated with your experience, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from? Have you experienced someone using protection or rescue as cover for control? How did you recognize what was happening? Your story might help someone else who's struggling. Please consider supporting the channel if these stories matter to you. You can find more stories on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next one. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day at 1-800-799-7233, and they can connect you with local resources and help you create a safety plan that's specific to your situation. They understand the complexities of situations like mine, where the person controlling you might not seem obviously abusive on the surface. They've seen it all before, and they won't judge you. Other resources that were helpful to me during my escape and recovery include local domestic violence shelters, which can provide temporary safe housing, legal aid organizations that can help you navigate restraining orders and other legal protections, and therapists who specialize in trauma from intimate partner violence. Don't try to do this completely alone. The isolation is part of how abusers maintain control, so breaking that isolation by reaching out for professional help is often the first and most important step toward freedom. I also want to emphasize that if you're currently being helped by someone and starting to feel uncomfortable with the dynamic, but you're not sure if your concerns are legitimate, trust that discomfort. Your instincts are trying to tell you something important. It's okay to set boundaries with people who are helping you. It's okay to say no to help that comes with strings attached. It's okay to walk away from a situation that doesn't feel right, even if you can't fully articulate why. You don't owe anyone continued access to your life just because they helped you once or because they claim to have your best interests at heart. Your safety and autonomy matter more than anyone's feelings about your choices.